Children struggle with writing for a number of different reasons. For some, it may be something called dysgraphia. For others, it might be a disorder of written expression or a specific learning disorder in writing. And for others, they might be just a little behind relative to their peers. Well, how do you know the difference and how do you support them? My guest today is Jan Esterkin. She is an educational therapist who loves to work with elementary age students in all subjects, especially in teaching reading and writing. Her love and compassion for her work is seen in her students' progress and their growing self-confidence. You are going to love this conversation.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Hi, Jan. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Karen. So great to see you.
It's so great to see you too. You know, when I was thinking about us doing this podcast episode, I was thinking that we've worked together for years, you know?
Well, and you tested my son when he was back in maybe middle school. And then once again, you know, going off to college. So
right.
Yeah, it's been a long road for us.
That tells you how long we've been doing this, right? If your son's in college, right? Or is
no, he's
graduated. He's graduated from college. So
totally. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So again, speaks to how long we've been doing this.
Right.
Yes.
And enjoying every minute.
Every minute of it. You know, before we started talking and recording the podcast, we were talking about, you know, how we're kind of stretched and doing different things in the space of supporting kids who think and learn differently. And I knew that I wanted to have you on the podcast at some point because of the work you do as an educational therapist with students. And we hadn't talked about writing that much on the podcast. And I really wanted to kind of dig in a little bit deeper because so many kids struggle with writing for so many different reasons, as you know. And depending on that reason, it really determines the course of action in terms of treatment and what the intervention looks like for that child.
And you've actually nailed the subject that I love the best. I suppose between teaching reading and teaching the writing process are my two favorite areas working with elementary school kids.
And that's where we see so many struggle,
Right.
So many struggle in those early, particularly in the early emerging readers, you know, they start to show signs that they're going to struggle. And then you really see it in first and second grade.
Yes.
Yeah. And, you know, you're talking about kids who struggle with writing, and that's your sweet spot. That's what you do, reading and writing. And, you know, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you come on was really to discuss some misunderstanding that a lot of families have, parents have, and even some educators on why kids struggle with writing. Because it could be dysgraphia or it could be a specific learning disorder in writing. Can you talk about how they are different? Because they're going to have a different approach in terms of intervention.
Yes. Dysgraphia, and I'll read just the National Center for Learning Disabilities, their list of symptoms. And a couple of them really overlap with educational therapy. So trouble forming letters, tight, awkward, painful pencil grip, difficulty following a line or staying within the margin, spacing letters correctly, writing in a straight line, writing legibly so that the student or somebody else can reread it. And then this is where it overlaps with ed therapy. Trouble with sentence structure or following grammar rules, difficulty organizing their thoughts onto paper, and spelling difficulties. And I find that the difficulty organizing thoughts onto paper is probably the biggest weakness of most of my students. You know, oftentimes they can talk chatty in our sessions. And you say, okay, you know, let's start doing some writing. and their sentences become very simple and, not using any of the sophisticated vocabulary that they were able to use as we were having a conversation. And so that's sort of the biggest disconnect, where they do have the words, but they can't get them onto paper. The harder student is the one that doesn't really have the words. And then you need to do a lot of word finding activities and categorization and synonyms and, just trying to develop some sort of vocabulary so that then you can start the writing process. I like to use the 12 words from the visualizing, verbalizing, sort of as a starting point, because those words, they really make the student think about, okay, where is this taking place? When is it taking place? I mean, they're real basic. And so, once, especially with the younger students, once we have sort of a word finding vocabulary, understanding of making a picture in your head, and then the picture becomes your writing, then we can start with the graphic organizer and developing sentences.
Right. And, as you're describing those symptoms of dysgraphia, I mean, they vary so greatly, because I'm thinking about the child who has, that tight pencil grip and may have difficulty forming the letters on the page. The intervention for that child is going to be very different than the child who can't spell the words because of a dyslexia.
Exactly. Yeah. And, with the child with the pencil grip, it depends on the severity. I mean, I have those little rubber pencil grips that they can put on the pencils. But, when it gets to be pretty severe, like they're, kind of leaning on their elbow, or the positioning of the paper is way off. They're holding more of like a fist grip rather than a finger grip. Those are the kinds of issues that I would send to an OT, because I just don't have the knowledge and the background to be as efficient as I could. So those are the students that I would send. The students that, don't quite get to the margin, I can do some sort of accommodations. We put a little highlighted circle. Here's where you need to start. The student that can't stay on the lines, I will actually, I oftentimes use Handwriting Without Tears. They have some great different kinds of graphing paper that the students can use that makes it a little bit easier to stay on the lines. I know the normal, college ruled or wide ruled paper it's difficult. You've got a bunch of lines and then the dotted lines and then another line to separate and then the line for writing. It's overwhelming. So Handwriting Without Tears does have different templates to use that makes it a little bit easier for writing.
And for those students who really struggle with kind of applying phonological processing to writing, it's almost like you can't even get to sentence structure if they can't spell the word. So it sounds like that is where you would have to start with those kids, because I can see those are the kids who have, again, all those ideas. They have a journal assignment. What did you do on the weekend? Like you're saying, they're coming to you and they're chatty, telling you all the things they did on the weekend. And then they look down at the blank page and they're like, I don't know how to spell these words. And that's kind of keeps them from expressing themselves in written form.
Well, what I do is for the younger students, I have a graphic organizer that's pretty simple. And I'm sure most people have seen it, the circle in the center with the 5 circles on the outside. So I do a lot of talk about the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, why. And on those 5 circles, I write the words who, what, where, when, why. And in the center is the main idea. So what is our story going to mostly be about? My favorite thing to do at school. So inevitably it's recess. So then we'll talk about, and this is like ultra scaffolding. We'll talk about, okay, who do you play with at recess? So in the little circle that says who, we write down the names of the kids that he plays with, he, she. What do you play? And I have two circles for the what, and I tell them this is your most important. This is where you're going to talk mostly about your details. And we talk a lot about details. What they mean is tell me more, make it interesting so that I want to read this. And then the when do you play recess? Where do you play recess? And why is it that you like recess so much? So we do a lot of that scaffolding. Then after, and oftentimes I've written in, they dictate to me and I write in all those words so that spelling is not an issue like you were asking. And then we number each circle. So, okay, which one do you want to talk about first? Which do you want to talk about second? And so we number those up to 5. And then I even scaffold it even more. And I tell them, oftentimes it's easiest to start with the when or the where. So if you're talking about recess, on a Monday at 10 o'clock, that's in our play, on the play yard, so now we've talked about the when and the where. My favorite thing to do is play recess. I play recess with, and then she lists the kids he plays with. Why do you like it so much? So it's super scaffolded. And I will write most of it if in fact the student has trouble with writing. And then when they go to write it, actually on hopefully a piece of easy to write on paper, if in fact they've got the pencil grip issue or the margin issue, my goal here is to get the context out. My goal is not if they can spell the word correctly or be able to know when a capital letter and a period. That will come afterwards. We keep them totally separate. So the first go around is just to get the story out, to get the context, and to have a beginning, middle, end, or to have the 5 W's, or some sort of organization to that short paragraph that they're writing. And again, this is for the younger students.
Right. And that's where I was going to go next, because writing in first grade is very different than writing in 4th or 6th grade. And I would love for you to talk about how you teach the writing process to students in grades 1 through 3 versus students in grades 4 through 6.
Right. Okay. So 1 through 3, I just went through. In grades 4 through 6, I'll start the same with the word finding, the vocabulary. Are they able to talk to me in a full sentence? So if I say to them, I have an interest inventory that I give them, the first session. And if I can just tell by that, if some of their answers are just, stuff, we do, cool things at school, and, not really telling me anything, then we'll go into several sessions on visualizing, verbalizing, and really understanding the importance of making sure that your reader can make a picture in their head of what you're writing. And I use, the analogy of when you go to a theater, when you're watching on TV, you don't have to make pictures in your head. They're right in front of you. But when you're thinking about a topic to write about and beginning the writing process, you need to make sure that who's ever going to read it can make pictures in their head so that they understand what you're writing. So we spend a lot of time on that. And then I have a different graphic organizer for the older students. It's a little bit more sophisticated. It's, again, using the main idea, but then I have, let me first go through the graphic organizer. So it's the main idea, and then it's 3 boxes that talk about what are your supporting details to go along with your main idea. And then under each of those 3 boxes, there's bullet points as to tell me more, give me more evidence. And then there's a conclusion at the end. So I learned about this through Step Up to Writing program, which I like to use. I've changed the graphic organizer a bit, but the reason that I like the Step Up to Writing program is that kids that need a lot of visual models, the big main idea is in green. The boxes underneath of the three main ideas are in red. Each detail are yellow stickers. And then the conclusion goes back to the green sticker because the main idea and the conclusion should go together. I always tell the kids, don't make it the same, but let the reader know that you're finishing up. And then also with the older students, before we start writing, I'll give them each a folder. And in the folder will be one of these graphic organizers. And then it will be a list of transition words. And, I tell them when you're in first and second, third grade, first, second, third, those are good transition words. But as you get to be more sophisticated writer, you're going to want to have different transition words. In addition, however, by the way, those kind of little bit more sophisticated transition words. And then in this folder, I have a list of, I call it outstanding openers. So what's a clever way that you're going to grab the reader besides just saying, this is a book report on Number the Stars? I always tell them, let's find a quote in the book that you really like that kind of talks about what the book is about, or use a word that has a sound to it, like boom, the Nazi soldiers scared me so much. Here's my opinion on Number the Stars, or something like that. Or I even teach them that you can use an action word, a verb, and add ing onto the end of it. And now you've got a more sophisticated sentence. Running across the schoolyard, I tripped and fell, whatever. So again, with the older students, it's similar, but everything is just on a more sophisticated level. And I find that this folder that they carry with them is really, really helpful, because if and one of the pages is called I'm Stuck. Like, I've had many teachers speak to me saying, they just sit there at their desk and everybody's starting to write and they just sit there. They have no idea where to start. So, in this folder that I give them, one of the pages is called I'm Stuck. What do I do? So you can think about the 5 W's. You can think about beginning, middle, end. You can think about your senses, what you saw, what you heard. So I try and, give them some sort of crutch to go on if, in fact, they can't think of anything. But in the older grades, most of the time, the teacher has given them a prompt.
And really what you're describing is really like this multi-dimensional approach to providing writing support. When you're talking about visualizing and verbalizing and providing support for vocabulary and giving them almost like a formula for writing and helping them to elaborate on their ideas. And it's really individualized, because I'm sure you see kids who struggle with writing, like we said at the beginning, for a number of different reasons. And you have to meet them where they are based on what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. So, some of the older students are pretty good writers. They just need to take a boring sentence and make it more interesting. And there's this great book called Banish Boring Words. It's like one of my favorites because,
oh my goodness, I'm writing that down.
Yes. It'll have just a whole list of other words rather than said. Especially a lot of the older kids have to use a lot of dialogue in their writing. So he said, she said, and it just goes through, there's got to be 100 words that you can use rather than said. And I encourage the kids to buy a copy of that, as well as the children's thesaurus is a really good asset to their writing if they're writing at home, because some of them, well, the one that I have, it includes synonyms and antonyms, and so that that makes it so much easier for them.
And, when you were talking about the child who kind of just sits and is stuck, you talked about having kids who get stuck, where they just sit there and stare at the blank page. And where my mind goes is to those kids who really struggle with executive functioning. And that's that task initiation. I'd love for you to talk about how, and we've talked on the podcast before about executive functioning, what it is, but how it impacts writing, because it seems like as it doesn't impact math and reading in the same way it does writing. It seems to have the biggest impact on writing.
Right. And I think the impact on writing is in the planning and the organizing. And again, using the graphic organizer to help with the planning and organizing. But then you also have the planning of let's say it's a long-term project. When should I start? And looking at a calendar and helping a student sort of divvy up the days of, here's on Monday, you should do this, on Tuesday, this. And many teachers will give students, forms to help them with this executive functioning. But when a teacher doesn't, then it's the ed therapist or the parent's job to help them break it down. So it might, the Peg Dawson books, she's sort of the maven on
I love
executive functioning.
Yes.
Yeah. And so she has a lot of templates in her book that are easy to Xerox and use with students. Like, okay, for this particular project, what materials do I need? Who's going to take me to the store? When should we go to the store? What should I buy? And then when I have them at home, which ones do I need to start the first part of my project? And you really have to, again, scaffold it way down step by step by step. So I think that in terms of the executive functioning is the hardest, is just the planning and the organizing and trying to help them figure out the days and the timing in order to get this completed, and to have several days at the end for the editing process.
And I think that's really important too, because I've seen and parents have said, they've written a page and it's just one sentence, and they have not been able to pay attention to capitalization and punctuation.
Yes.
And you see that a lot, particularly with kids who have attention issues.
Right. We see it a lot. But again, like I mentioned, when we're first getting the story down, I don't care about the spelling, the punctuation, because if you think about it, there's so many things for a student to think about when they're doing writing. It's not only the pencil grip and the position of the paper, but what are they going to say, and how do you spell it, and how do you make that letter, and was that a question or a statement or an exclamation point that I should put at the end? So I just tell them, don't think about those things now. And when we're all finished, we'll go through one by one. So maybe on the day of editing, all we're going to think about is capital letters. Look at every sentence and make sure you have a capital letter at the beginning. Then go back, look at every sentence, make sure you have something at the end. And then the spelling, is always huge, especially the plural possessives and the singular possessives, and how to do dialogue. So, it gets into a lot of rules, spelling rules, grammar rules, that a lot of students just aren't interested in.
Right.
Yeah. So,
and it can feel overwhelming to kids because they have to pay attention and focus on so many things while they're writing. And then they've got these great ideas that they want to get out. And I can see how that can lead a child to just shut down. Oh, it's just too much. Or write as little as possible. Like you said in the beginning, they just write, 2 sentences. I'm done. My essay's
right.
done.
Right. Well, that's when I try and get in, we'll do a lot of work on a boring sentence, like I mentioned, and a more interesting one. So the dog barked. And I'll say, can I make a picture in my head of what the dog looked like? No. Can I make a picture in my head of what the dog was barking at? No. Okay, so let's add those 5 W's. So in my backyard, again, I like to start with the where and when. In my backyard, late at night, a brown and white spotted big dog, so now we can picture what the dog looked like, barked at a raccoon that was in our trash cans. And then we'll kind of giggle at, okay, the dog barked versus, and I'll say, which one can you make a better picture? Which do you think the reader is going to be more interested in listening or reading about? So it kind of becomes sort of almost like a game, going from a really boring sentence to a more interesting one. The other game that it's kind of a game, but it's a writing exercise that the kids love. It's called Descriptive Mysteries. And what it is that we each get a page of, let's say, like 20 dogs are on a page. Some are sitting, some are standing, some have spots, some don't. Some are wearing a collar, some are not. Some have floppy ears, some have pointy ears, different tails. So first we talk about and make a list of all the different things. Okay, let's look at ears, let's look at muzzle, let's look at sitting or standing, let's look at, are they positioned left or right? And so we make that list. And this is mostly with, I would say, 4th grade and up. And then we each sit separately, and I tell them to write a little story. And I have one that I model for them. So I will read my story first, telling about that you lost your dog and that you need help finding your dog. So they sit and I sit, and we both write a paragraph, again, with an opening. I lost my dog. Can you help me find it? My dog looks like, and they can't list, the dog has, and they go through all the things. Then we exchange stories and we exchange papers, and it's, process of elimination that you cross out the ones that it couldn't possibly be, and then you find the one at the end that they were writing about. So it's a great exercise. There's probably 20 or 30 different pictures in this book. And I just love it. I use it I can even use it with 3rd graders and really scale it down. Again, using that circle graphic organizer and, okay, what color is the dog? Where is the dog, sitting or standing? Does the dog have a collar? And we'll use that in terms of being able to write the paragraph so that I have to find their dog and they have to find mine.
And those are such great techniques, Jan. And I just know the impact of the work that you do, because I've seen so many students who, struggle with putting sentences together, struggle with elaborating on their thoughts and ideas, even though they have them in their head and they're able to verbalize them, but can't write them down. And it makes such a difference when a student gets to work with someone like you.
Oh, thank you.
Because they're really able to express themselves in a way that they intended, right? Because oftentimes the writing before working with someone like you doesn't really reflect all the thoughts and ideas that are in their head. Exactly. And when they're able to get it on paper, there's just so much joy and so much pride in being able to do that.
Yes. Yeah. And, the hardest students are those that either, don't think they need your help, or those that kind of, even with their body language, they'll start writing and they turn away like, I don't want you to look. I don't want you to help me. I can do this on my own. So those are the tough ones to break through. Actually, 2 are the tough ones, those and the ones that just, I'm stuck. I don't have any ideas. I don't know what I want to write about. I don't have any interests. I don't have hobbies. They're just flat. So you really have to get in there, and I try and use humor And I try and use games. There's a lot of fun games that kind of bring about word identification, word knowledge. And, sometimes it's a slow process, but we get there. Lots of scaffolding, lots of graphic organizers. Oh, then I had a student just last week. Oh, we don't use graphic organizers. So I said, okay, well, that's going to make it a little hard, but here's the one that I use. And then I emailed the teacher and I said, by the way, do you use graphic organizers? Because maybe it would be better if I use the same one with the student that you're using in class. Oh, yeah, sure, we do. I'll send it to you.
That is so funny.
They try and get away with stuff. But in the end, I think they're really proud of their work and they really see a big difference. I keep a journal. They do a lot of writing in the journal. And, I show them what they've done the very first few sessions and how far they've come. So, they're very proud.
Absolutely. And they
as
should
are the
be.
Parents and teacher.
Absolutely. And really what you're doing is you're helping them develop skills. So you're doing more than just helping them with their homework. You're really helping them to develop skills, lifelong skills that they can use, as they get older and as they get into higher grades, as they go to college.
Right. And along with the writing, like we've both talked about, is the executive functioning. So you're working on that as well. The planning, the organizing, I even use the executive function with, students that need to read a novel. We'll sit there and okay, when is the project due? Let's do a little math and figure out how many pages you need to read per night to get it to the ending date. And then, of course, give yourself enough time to write the summary or whatever the teacher is asking you to do.
And, I love these tools. You've described kind of the graphic organizer, the visualizing and verbalizing, and those supports that so many of our students benefit from. And you actually sent me a list of resources, some of your favorite resources, and I'm going to make sure I put them in the show notes so that parents or educators can download that information, because it's just so helpful. Sometimes just the right support, right amount of support, the right resource can make a significant difference in a child's life. And I thank you for putting that together.
And I think this folder that I make for each student is just, so helpful. And with so many accommodations, here's some good openers, here's some good transition words, here's some good ways to, conclude your paragraph. Here's a list of words other than said or other than a lot. That's another big one that they all use, a lot.
I see that a lot.
I see it a lot too.
Jan, if someone wants to get in touch with you to discuss a child's writing struggles or working with you to address areas of difficulty, where can they go? How can they reach you?
Well, my email is jan.esterkin, ESTERKIN, @gmail.com. And I have a website that's www.janesterkin.com.
And I will be sure to put that information in the show notes. I cannot thank you enough. This has been such an important conversation because it's an area where so many children struggle from first grade to high school and even in college. I taught at the college level and I see students who never got the underlying skills for writing and struggle at the college level. So thank you so much for having this discussion today.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Jan is one of our incredible Child Nexus professional members, committed to helping students who learn and think differently thrive. If you're an allied professional and you want to be part of this amazing community, reach out to me at drkiwilson@childnexus.com and let's have a conversation. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.